What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Max Minus here. Welcome to the lab, where I teach you how to level up your beats. Today, I'm going to share 2 secrets that the industry's best producers use to make dark and catchy melodies. So stay tuned, you don't want to miss out. If you like the video, please hit the like button, hit subscribe, and hit the bell notification, because you don't want to miss out when I'm dropping these production gems. Without further ado, let's get into it. Secret number 3 is to make smooth melody variations every 2 to 4 measures. Alright guys, so for secret number 3, basically we want to have smooth variations of the melody every 2 to 4 measures. So what I did here for the intro is 2 measures right here. And let me make sure tempo's off. Okay, so check out the piano pattern that I'm playing here, and I'll even open in the piano roll so you have an idea of the structure. Okay, so you can see here with this beat, or with this melody rather, and I'm kind of spoiling one of the secrets, but here's my treble clef. I'll talk about the treble clef more later on, but basically it's the higher level notes of the melody, so I'll play it again just so you can hear. Okay. And then I use the bass clef here. So these are the lower octave notes, the ones that give it the heaviness and the depth, which is a really good tool to build up hype for your drops. Okay, so that's why I used it in this intro, because it adds gravity, depth, heaviness, and a little bit of intensity to the pre-drop pattern. Okay, so this is what it sounds like. All right, so you can hear the depth and the intensity of that pattern. Now, what I did here is all I did for these next 2 measures, I subtracted those bass notes so that I lightened it up, right? Because we want that heaviness for the bass drop, or for the beat drop, and then we want to slowly build up until the drop again. So this is what it sounds like at the drop, right? So here's the measure. It's about to drop. You're going to hear what the verse starts at 9 right here. So you'll hear the difference. So the bass clef is still there. However, I'm using a higher octave version of it just to lighten up the intensity so that I can slowly build up the intensity or the tension through the verse, and then when the chorus comes along, boom, it drops. Okay, so let's listen to these 2 measures here. All right, so the only difference, I'm going to repeat it, the only difference between these 2 right here, and I'll even show you on the piano roll. So here's the first one that I showed you at the intro. And then here's the pattern for the verse, right? So we're missing those 2 layers of the bass clef or the lower octave notes. All right, so you can hear how it loses that depth and intensity a little bit. All right, and then I reintroduce it right here. So I brought in those bass notes again to start rebuilding the intensity as the verse starts to progress. Okay. Okay, so this is where things get really cool. So I layered in for the chorus, I layered 2 patterns. So I'm going to play you pattern 1 all by itself. Okay, so this is what the first pattern sounds like. For this pattern, what I did is I removed the last beat of the bass clef because it felt like there was too much movement going on here. So I kept the treble clef and removed the bass clef of the last beat. As you practice and kind of get a feel for your melodies, you'll be able to hear if there's too much going on in certain areas. And so it's okay to remove pieces of your melody if it's interfering with other moving parts, right? So that's the example of the first pattern right there. So let's play the previous pattern so you can hear the similarities between the pre-chorus and then the chorus. Okay, so I added in a few chords here, right? There weren't as many chords in this pattern. Just a lot of single notes playing, but then I added in chords to build up that intensity. Okay, and then here, that second pattern that I layered, and it's just higher octave triplets. So this is very similar to the triplet pattern that I had here. So this pattern right here. So this organization of triplets is basically the same as this one, except all I did was bring it up an octave. All right, so it's a smooth variation. I'm not changing up too much. I'm just taking some things out. I'm raising some note structures in octave. I'm dropping down some note structures in octave based on the type of tension that I'm trying to create throughout the beat, okay? And then here's my pre-verse. So I kept in that layer of triplets here. But then for this part, for this pattern, all I had was the bass clef, right? I have all these bass notes here. I'll play it for you. All right, so I wanted to slow things down a lot and slowly rebuild the tension and that intensity through the next verse into the next chorus, okay? So, but what I found was when I was creating this pattern, if I just had the bass clef here, it didn't sound like the beat had enough movement to it. So then I just added in that layer of the higher octave triplets here, and it gave it a really cool feel. So it felt like another step of rebuilding that intensity, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So you guys get the idea. And then what I did is I basically just did the same structure for here and did it here and here, right? So this beat is going to have 3 choruses, and I did the same structure of verse to chorus 3 times throughout the beat. So that summarizes secret number 3, which is using smooth variations of your melody every 2 to 4 measures. Secret number 4 is to learn how to use and create the treble and bass clef for your melodies. All right, guys, so I'm going to create a melody from scratch, actually. And so let's start off with an example of the treble clef, okay? So the treble clef, right, if you read music or you're attempting to learn the piano, for instance, you're going to have your right hand likely playing the treble clef, which is the higher level notes. And then if you're playing the bass clef, it's going to be the lower level notes, the lower octave notes. You're likely going to be playing it with your left hand. My plan originally was to show you how I make a melody live and then create the treble and bass clef, but my audio didn't work. So I'm just going to have to show you guys the final product of the melody that I created. right? So basically it's the same pattern for both measures here. Go ahead and listen again for the bass clef. Right, so I have A, F, and D down here for the bass clef. So let's check out what it sounds like without the bass clef here. So as a producer, with just the treble clef here and without the bass clef, the melody sounds kind of empty, or like there's a component missing from it. So from here, you could either add in the bass clef back in there or add different components of a treble clef to the melody just to fill in those gaps. When we have the bass clef in here, you can kind of already tell in terms of like what I mean is, for the 808 pattern that I'm going to use, if we just use that treble clef, I could get really creative with it. Whereas if we have the bass clef in here, you probably already have a good idea of what the 808 pattern is going to sound like, right? It's probably going to be very similar to the pattern here. I'll put an example up here of a beat that I made where literally verbatim the same structure of the bass clef that was in the melody I followed for the 808. All right, so check that out. And so I think this is useful information because a while ago when I first started making beats, I had some trouble creating 808 patterns, because if your melodies don't have a good progression, you don't have chords, and you don't have enough layers of notes in general, there's not going to be enough movement, and it's just not going to give you a good idea of how to create a 808 pattern from there. So at least with this, I know that I can hear in my mind's ear, right, so to speak, I can hear the type of 808 pattern that I want to create. Now, because I have more experience, if I was to get rid of this bass clef pattern, I could definitely get really creative with the 808 pattern. However, for somebody who's just starting off with beats, or somebody who's maybe a little bit more intermediate, I would definitely consider creating more layers, especially adding the bass clef if you want to have a good progression and a good idea to follow for the rest of your beat after you create the melody. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Now, I talked about this already in a previous section of the video, but I like to use bass clefs to build tension before a drop, or like add in like a cinematic intensity type of vibe, or like this heaviness. So go ahead and listen again. And then right there, you can kind of feel the need to change up the pattern a little bit, right? For like a beat drop or just a change in general. So using the bass clef there gives you a few opportunities for building tension or resolving tension. That pretty much summarizes secret number 4. That's gonna wrap up today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification. If you have any questions or you just want to add to the discussion, please comment below. And until next time, peace.